each other for a long time, and it's been like really spectacular to see the journey you've been on. The question I wanted to ask that I thought of the first time you said, I think I'm going to write a book, and I think I'm going to go launch this other thing, is you are this amazing person for the last, 2 decades? Been in the business of building schools and done
I
a great...
just told the man who was serving wine I wasn't 21 yet, so I think he's selling me out a little
So this is a good start to the interview. Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. So 20 years. Why go from that to writing a book and thinking about parents?
Yeah. Well, first, just thank you, Deborah, for inviting us and for this conversation. I must say I'm a little bit awed and humbled to be in this incredible, amazing institution tonight. So I just want to take a moment to be grateful for being here with all of you, and just feeling really humble and honored to be here. So I wrote the book mostly because you told me I should, but
good answer.
But also because the 2 hardest things I've ever done in my life are 1, to start a school, and 2 is to be a parent. And it turns out that I had my son and started the school 6 weeks later, so that probably compounded the difficulty. But as I have spent the last 2 decades watching other parents and lots of teachers and educators start schools and to try to find their way through school systems as parents, I realize that educators and parents are most often missing each other, and they're talking across each other, and they want the same thing, and yet somehow they can't figure out how to work together effectively to do that. And so what I hoped is I could tell a personal story from both perspectives that might bring people together.
Okay. So I remember, as a side note, one of my favorite stories of all time is when you sort of birthed this idea. We were hanging out together in Boston, and you remember, those of you back east, we had that bomb cyclone a few years back. So we got trapped in our office. It was just us and nobody else, and some mac and cheese in the microwave. It was a lot of fun. I have to say, in that moment, I had imagined, given where you were coming from, that this might be a book for teachers, right? Because you just talked about like that sort of interface and like, but you didn't, right? You wrote it for parents. How come?
Yeah, a couple of things. So, I'm an educator. That's what I do. I was a teacher. I was a school leader. I now have 15 schools of my own that we run. And whatever it is, 7 years ago, other schools wanted the tools that we had and what we were doing, and so we created the Summit Learning Program to give to them. And that ended up exposing me to 40 different states and communities all across the country. And I spent several years going to those places and talking to people. And what I found was, a ton of educators who think like we do and who care so deeply and want the tools and the resources and the PD in order to serve kids in the way they know is best. And they feel like they run into brick walls in their communities. And we have had some really intense experiences where educators were trying to do these things that they thought parents would want and really getting attacked in their communities. And it was baffling to me because when I would talk to the parents, they would say, this is what we want. And so the book is to parents to try to talk to them in a non-jargony way, to actually share stories with them that might resonate, and to try to meet them where they are. Most people in education only go to parents when they need them to do something. And that's usually to pay some more taxes, or to pass, a bond, or to advocate for a school, not to actually help them with their child.
When I remember when you thought you were very intentional, with the title, and I was very envious because almost never do authors actually get to name the title of their book. I think people don't realize like the marketing department in the publishing house usually gets to do that. But you managed to slip one by them, which was amazing. So I'm interested in like, I know how intentional you were about it. So this is a book called Prepared, and it's about how do we equip kids to live fulfilling life. So would you say a little bit more about like, from your perspective, right? On the one hand, I sort of think I know what it means to be prepared for like the last 50 years of, what it means for a kid. What do you mean by that? What does it mean to prepare a kid, and what does it mean for them to be ready to live a fulfilling life?
Yeah. I think I and we have really embraced a new definition of what we hold ourselves accountable to in the Summit schools. And that is what I want as a parent. I want my school to be a partner with me in preparing my child for life. And for sure, that means he needs to read and do math, for sure. I'm not sure what score that means he needs on a variety of exams, but I know he needs to do math and reading. But he needs a lot more than that to be ready for life. He needs a whole suite of what we would call the habits of success that people who are successful in life have. They have interpersonal skills, and they're able to communicate effectively, and they are self-directed, and they know how to learn. He needs these big universal skills that cross-cut against disciplines, and the ability to problem solve and make a coherent argument and support it with evidence. Although that might not be true anymore, no. From my perspective, he needs a concrete next step when he graduates from high school. And I think as a K-12 system, we should be held accountable for all of those outcomes for kids. And that's what the Prepared looks like today, is that kids have that suite of skills in addition to content knowledge and subject areas, to be ready for the life that they want to live and that we want them to be able to live. And what that life looks like, a fulfilled life looks like, is that they are able to do meaningful, purposeful work every day. That they have enough economic stability that they can actually feel secure. That they have community and relationship and health to go about their daily lives. And that's a pretty universal definition of fulfilled, and it's not what we're holding ourselves accountable to as partners with parents, as a general rule.
Okay, so I picked 4 parts of the book that were some of my favorite, and I wanted to ask you questions about it now. Okay. So the first, because it was really kind of personal to me, is around this idea of learning from failure, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, like, I have 2 boys, as you know, and I remember vividly my oldest son in high school, we thought we were telling them, figure out what you care about, it's okay. We thought we were doing this thing right, and I remember there was a moment when my son Austin was late in his junior year, and he had met a girl, which is always a troubling motive to begin with, and he says, look, she goes to France all the time, and she's telling me I should take this French literature class. And I said, okay, he's a computer science, math person. And I said, this is great, okay? And then he came home and he said, look, I'm not gonna do it because I don't really know if this is my thing, and what if I actually don't do well in it? And he said, look, isn't that going to affect my ability to get into MIT, these other things? And I honestly, I wanted to say, still take it, do it, but I couldn't look him in the eyes and say, no, look, I mean, this really is a risk, right? Like, it really, if you fail at this, it's not nothing, right? So I was very intrigued by the idea of, the centrality of failure and learning to fail there. And for me, I was thinking, given most parents are probably in a similar situation that I just described with their kids, how do you talk about, how do schools and parents, create those conditions in this world we live in, right? That allow kids to fail and learn from it.
It's such an important concept, and I live in Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley loves this idea of failure, and we have all these myths about how wonderful failure is, and how, just drop out of Harvard and you're going to be an incredible success, and there's a couple of those for sure, but the reality is, failure only is useful in a learning experience if it has, in my opinion, two qualities to it. And the way that I think about this is the story that I really think about and resonates for me is I did not have a great childhood. Something that you and
I read that in your book.
Yeah. And one of the experiences that stays with me to this day is it was a relatively unsafe home, pretty abusive home. And I think this is not that abnormal, maybe, but my dad thought that the way you taught someone how to swim was just to throw me in the deep end of the pool when I had no idea how to swim. And so he did that one day. Fortunately, my mom was paying enough attention and dove in and pulled me off the bottom of the pool. And if you've ever been drowning, you know that you never forget that feeling. That's not the good kind of failure. I didn't learn to swim from that experience, and in fact, it set me back because then I had a real fear of the water that I took a long time to overcome. And so when I think about that story and I think about the kind of failure that works, it needs two things to be true. One, the failure can't be so profound that it cuts off life opportunities for your future. And two, the person who's failing has to have a mechanism and a way to actually learn from that failure, which generally includes some sort of reflection and coaching and, understanding of what happened, so that you can apply that to the next scenario. And so, to me, those are the two qualities. You've introduced a dilemma with the story of your son, because what we all know is it's true, and you knew this. The F on the transcript probably was going to cut off a life opportunity for him. It's an unfortunate part of our current system. And so I guess at Summit, we try to think about those failures being much smaller and much earlier in the learning cycle where they're actually recoverable.
The second thing that I thought was interesting, and also as a parent, I found scary but good, which is this emphasis on sort of curiosity-driven learning and essentially like things you're actually interested in, and you see that a lot when you go into a Summit school, right? And it's pretty remarkable. I think one of the things I hear parents say when there's a part of us that is like, no, I know that's better, but my kid just is going to be interested in Fortnite, right? So it's like Fortnite-based education for the rest of their life. How should we as parents think about how it is we encourage that curiosity-based learning, but also expand the palette a bit?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that come to mind. One is the way I think we do it in the school building is through real-world, authentic, project-based learning. And, well-designed project learning has kind of the meat and potatoes that kids need to learn underneath it, but it offers a lot of choice and a lot of opportunity and a lot of entry points that allow kids to be curious, and it's centered around real problems that matter to them, that are relevant. That doesn't mean that they're not going to learn all the pieces that they need to learn and more, but it does give them access to that. But at home, as a parent, the way I think about this is sort of three parts. One, my job as a parent is to expose my child to as many things as possible. And in our world today, we have such an emphasis on expertise that we start so early kind of driving our kids in to find the one single passion so they can become expert at it. This happens a lot in sports because people think if you're not on the travel soccer team by the time you're 8, you won't get your scholarship and you won't go on, and it just goes on and on and on. And we end up closing off opportunities to expose our kids to things. And then obviously there's also an access issue for a lot of our families who don't have access to exposing their kids to a ton of things. And so this is where I think we as a school really need to take ownership of that and partner with our families. And then once you're exposing, there will be things that intrigue them or interest them. And I think we have to then try to find ways that they can explore those in greater depth. But they're also going to have to cycle through things. And then ultimately, the idea is to find some things that they can pursue at even greater depth. And I think having sort of a number of those things over the lifetime of your child is the best way we can think about really helping them to find their interests and be driven by their curiosity.
So one of the things, I don't think I've ever told you this, but so the first time I ever heard of you and heard of what you were doing in Summit, and I had heard lots of great things about it, when I first came and met you and then saw a school, the thing that stood out to me, and I feel kind of silly saying this, I imagine, especially now as this scales, such a heavy tech component, which, look, at the end of the day, that is true. You need that, right? What I was struck by was that was always in the background, even though it's central. But what kept showing up over and over again and struck me was this emphasis on two things, and they're related, the culture and relationships, right? And it was so obvious that those were the driving factors. And I just would love for you to talk a little bit about like the importance of that, especially given like most of us here are talking about tech and talking about like the role of that, just like.
Yeah. Well, I think what's at the heart of what you're saying is, look, learning is inherently social. It's a social activity. Learning occurs when you're actually thinking about your own thinking and you're reflecting and you're engaging and you're actively involved. And so, a number of people said it today. Jesse certainly was talking about it earlier, that this idea that you'll never take the human part out of learning, no matter what. And we've tried. And unfortunately, the word personalized learning created this images in people's minds of like kids by themselves on computers alone, which no wonder people have an averse reaction to that, because it just doesn't make sense, because it isn't the way we actually learn as people. And so, you're right. From our perspective, technology is an incredibly powerful tool, and we couldn't do what we do without it, but it's just a tool. And the learning takes place in a community that is physically and emotionally safe, that has a common set of values and a clarity of purpose, and is really built on strong relationships, trusting relationships, because that's when you learn best.
Yeah, and again, if you've never been to Summit, it's really remarkable to see that in action. One of the things that you and I always talk about that, like, there's so much in our current education system that just is happening because it's the way it's always been done. And you sort of like, why do we do this? And no one quite knows the reason. And so one of my favorite stories that you tell is around trying to help your kid with homework. And divorce might be a strong word as a result, but like the challenges come in. Could you maybe share that a little bit and what you learned from it?
Yeah, so my son has gone to one of my schools since 6th grade, and I was 1 week traveling all week long, and I got home late Friday night. It's Saturday morning. I've like just gotten out of bed. I'm getting my first cup of coffee, and my husband is walking in from walking the dog in the morning, and he's really angry. And I think, what did the dog do this morning? It turns out it wasn't the dog, it was me. He's really frustrated because he was trying to help my son with his math homework while I was gone. And at first I was a little confused because we don't even really have homework at Summit. So I was kind of like, what is that, And he's all he can say to me is, you don't have a textbook. And I'm like, yeah? What's the problem? He's like, well, I couldn't remember exactly how to do it, and so there was no textbook to flip to the back and just figure it out and then be able to help him. And so I was like, okay, why don't you tell me what happened? And he said, well, we had to sit down together, we had to watch some YouTube videos, and then we had to work through some problems, and he actually realized how to do it, and he was showing me, and then he was working the problems, but there was this one problem he couldn't figure out, and I was like, okay, what happened? He's like, well, he went to school the next day, and his teacher helped him, and I was like, I'm sorry, but what's the problem here? Isn't this what we want? Like, your child's explaining math to you, you're doing it together, he's getting help from his teacher, he gets it, it's fine. He's like, I didn't know what my job was. And in that moment, I realized he wasn't angry, he was scared. He had a mental model of what it meant to be a good dad. And he didn't know how to be a good dad in this model anymore. And he wasn't mad at me, his wife. He was mad at me, the lady who made the school that his child was going to. And what I also realized in that moment is I had not brought him along as a parent. And so yet another reason to write the book, to try to help parents come along and understand I'm not trying to torture them. You know, it's just the world looks a little bit different, and we for what we want for our kids, we're going to have to be willing to do a few things differently ourselves.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I would never ever write a parenting book is then if you have a child of your own, that kid better be frickin' perfect, right? Now, you'll never say this.
He's not perfect.
He's not perfect.
He's super far from it.
But I'm not saying I would trade one of my kids, but I love my kid. I feel like Rhett I want to adopt him. Like, it's ridiculous how great of a kid he is. And what's been intriguing, besides the fact that, like, you know, he gave my presentation better than I did in, like, wherever you were, like Bulgaria, right? He's putting me out of business. That was unfortunate. But what's remarkable to me is watching him now. Look, he's a senior, right?
He's a senior.
And I was sympathizing watching this kid who's been in an environment since the very, very early times, and then suddenly having to think about college, right? And I know we've had a lot of conversations along the way about that, but I would love to, like, how's that going?
Yeah.
And, like, look, we can't be the only parents of kids that are at least somewhere in that space. Like,
Who's a parent in here?
that you know of.
Okay, good. Look, we're not alone.
We're not alone. Yeah, how do you, like, look, it kind of sucks, frankly, right? It's terrible that right now, college is a thing, like, whether you like it or not, your kid needs to be prepared for that. And for me, I watched it actually turn my son into something that he wasn't before. And he became selfish in a weird way. And we had to just make a break and say, you're taking a gap year. Go serve, go do something else. How have you managed that? Or is Rhett still the Rhett that I love? Or,
This story does so far have a happy ending, so I will tell you. I will say I feel incredibly grateful to be in a partnership with a school that shares my values and is trying to help me raise my child in the way that I want to raise him. His experience, look, in 9th grade, he actually asked me, Mom, what are the self-directed colleges out there? And I will be honest, I got caught off guard because I've been so focused on, high school that it didn't occur to me to think about what are the self-directed colleges. And so I sort of fumbled and stumbled. I was like, well, I think Oxford's kind of the original, and, Brown, and this place called Minerva. And so over the years, he's done his research, and we went and visited and whatnot. And by the time he was starting his senior year, he has such a clear sense now of who he is and what he cares about and how he learns. And as you know, he loves the world, and he loves geography, and he loves maps, and he loves history, and he loves to travel. And he really knows how to learn. He has learned that at Summit and from Summit. And so his first choice, far and away, was Minerva. And so, yes.
He got rejected, but this is okay.
And so, the short story is he came to us in the fall. He submitted early application, and he said, I'm not going to apply to any other schools this year. I'm not going to apply to one. He said, I can't picture myself anywhere else. So if I don't get into Minerva, I'm going to take a gap year. I'm going to ask them if there's any chance that I'll get in there in the future. And if there's not, then I will make another plan in my gap year. And I'm going to go for it. And the best compliment I can play, Ben, who's in the audience, and is that he has truly redesigned the experience. And the best moment was when my son came out of doing the performance tasks for Minerva. He did the SATs as well, which were a torturous experience. He came out of those tasks, and I said, well, how'd it go? He said, I'm not sure how I did, but it felt fair. And I thought, a kid just told me that their college application process felt fair. What more could you ask for? He has been accepted. He is going there next year, and we're really, really excited.
So, this is my last question for you. I remember the first time that I got to spend time with your other kids, right? The kids at your school. And the thing that stuck with me and the thing that sort of really converted me from being, on paper it looks right, it sounds right, I could not believe the incredible self-confidence, like the authentic confidence that these kids have. Like, they know who they are, they know how they learn, they understand. Short of like the very best Montessori, I've never seen anything like it, right? And I remember going home to my wife and was like, well, that's too bad. Our kids, I wish our kids could have gone there. And I feel like for me, that's like the best compliment. I wish my kids could have had that. I wish everybody's kids could go to a school that you've created. At least right now, that's not possible. So if you could just maybe say a few things, like for those people who their kids can't go to a Summit school, like what should we be looking for, right? And what is the role of a parent in that process?
Yeah, and this has been a quest for me for a long time. I swore I'd never open a second school after my first one, and I did because of waiting for Superman and the lottery, literally. And then we opened as many of ours, and then we said we couldn't do that, so we would just give it away so other schools could do it, and that's still not enough. And so then I wrote this book to try to help parents. A couple of thoughts. One, we've created an organization called Prepared Parents, or it's at preparedforsuccess.org, to try to give parents what they tell us they want and need is like daily tips. Like, what can I do with 5 minutes today to help my child? Or what can I do with 10 minutes? Or what routines can I build? And, don't tell me like I read all of these articles and books and whatnot. Like, how do I actually put that into practice? So we built that organization for them. But I think as I'm a parent, if I'm looking for partners as a parent, what I'm looking for are people who share my same values and the outcomes that I want for my child, and actually take ownership in helping me, working with me towards those as opposed to working against me. And those are the types of questions that I ask when I'm looking for who's really going to help raise my child with me.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for
Thank you.
time. We get to spend a lot of time together. I've never got to interview her, so this was fun.
Yeah, it was.
I got some of my questions answered. I'm glad I was prepared. And look, I think you're doing remarkable things. I think it takes a lot of courage to go outside of your core strength, because it needed to be done. And I highly recommend, I'm certainly biased, but get the book, read the book. It's really a profound read. So just join me in thanking Diane for being here.
Thank you so much.